Thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about some very important things. And specifically, we're going to talk about what men need to know about women and what they need to know about relationships. Now, if you don't have a relationship right now, what you learn here in the next 45 or so minutes will help you not only get a relationship, but be able to keep one. Now, if your relationship is good, that's great. But I'm going to tell you, it can always be better. There's always room for improvement. If your relationship is struggling, what you're going to hear in the next session is going to give you some help that very possibly may save your relationship. You know, in the course of my practice, most divorces don't just happen spontaneously. What happens is we begin to, our ability to communicate begins to degrade, and we get to the point where all of a sudden we just kind of give up and we start to insert the divorce rhetoric, you know, like, I'm going to file for divorce. Well, you go ahead, do whatever you have to do, et cetera, et cetera. And we start kicking that back and forth. And we end up sliding into a situation that we can't back up with because we don't have the communication skills to be able to handle that. Now, I'm also going to tell you that even though I'm concentrating on men specifically, I want you to understand that women are culpable also. Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like that, but I'm just going to tell you, everybody has a piece of the action, and everybody has some culpability in the way that situation progresses. Now, one of the problems that we run into is that men, we have a tremendous amount of difficulty being able to understand what's going on with our wives. And even though they talk to us, we don't understand really what it is that they're trying to say. Now, I can tell you from the women's side, they hear it. And they hear it and they understand it, even though it hurts very deeply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain some differences between men and women that are going to help you understand that person that you're living with. Now, I don't want you to get the idea that we as men are bad. We're not. There are just things that we don't know. Now, I also hope that there are some women that are watching this, and hopefully with sons or husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And as you watch this, I hope what you'll do is voice your agreement with the things that we're going to talk about, because that's going to lend some credibility to it. And I can tell you there are a lot of things that we're going to be talking about that men are hearing for the very first time. And they need to understand that they're true. Now, let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of a relationship. You know, in the very beginning of the relationship, we pick someone or we find someone that when we're in their physical presence, we have this wonderful feeling. And it's a very handy thing for us because it helps us pick somebody out of the crowd. And I can tell you that feeling has nothing to do with looks, money, charm, dress, any of those things. It's all about the feeling. When I'm with that person or close to that person, I have this tremendous feeling. If we're lucky, we find somebody that has that same feeling for us. And at that point, we are enjoying the relationship so much and the closeness and togetherness. It's like, let's do this all the time. So we make a decision. We decide to get in some sort of a committed relationship. We move in together. We get married. We get engaged. We go steady, whatever it is. But we want to experience this all the time. Now, I can tell you that in the early stages of this relationship, we're beginning to find out some things about our partner that we're really not all that crazy about. But what we do is we kind of push those under the rug. And we do that because it's all about the feeling. Even when our partners do things that we think, oh man, I wish he hadn't have done that, or she hadn't have done that, we still feel so good in their presence that we ignore that. And so we rock along for a period of time, enjoying that, having our little squabbles every now and then. But then one day we reach something that I call the critical point in a relationship. And when this happens, one person, the other person, maybe both at the same time, they wake up one day and they say, you know what, I don't have that feeling anymore. Now, intellectually, we're pretty sure we didn't make a mistake. We know this person, we've been to holiday with them, we know their family, we know secrets. Unless we married a psychopath or something, then we know we're in good shape. But something's not right. I just don't have that feeling anymore. Now, I can tell you at this critical point, there are some things that have to be done in order to make it from a short-term to a lifetime relationship. And part of it has to do with being able to communicate what we need to know. Because here's what happens. Up until that time, that critical point that we were talking about, we have been depending on our partner to give us this feeling. We've been waking up every morning wondering, what is it that my partner is going to do for me to give me this feeling? Well, I don't have a feeling now, so they must be withholding something. Now, in a nutshell, what has to happen is this. The initial stage, we wake up thinking, what's my partner going to do for me to bring me joy? What has to change is this. What can I do for my partner to bring joy to their life? Because that's where that joy is reflected back on me. Now, what keeps that from happening? Well, what keeps that from happening is our inability to communicate to each other what it is that we want and we need. So for men, it's basically a question of not being able to hear what our wives are telling us that we need to know to bring joy in their life. Now, we're going to explain the differences in a relationship here in the next few minutes, but I want to set the stage with this. Why is it that we don't know what it is to do? We're not bad people, we just don't know. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to blame it on my pet peeve of feminism. You know, I grew up in the 60s, and that was back in the days of feminism. And the whole concept of feminism was to get women into the workplace. And I'm going to tell you, it worked famously. It did its job. But I'm going to tell you the repercussions of that last even all the way up to today. And this is why. If the assumption is that women can do everything that men can do, and if you ask a feminist, even better, then they must think and feel the same way that men do. And I'm going to tell you, they don't. There is no resemblance whatsoever with the way men think and feel about things and the way women think and feel about things. And I'm going to tell you that is destructive to relationships. It has been for the last 40 years, and it is going to continue to be until we begin to understand the differences. And what I'm also going to propose to you is the fact that this, because we are so different, relationships are always on an uneven playing field. Now, part of feminism is that we accept every relationship, every marriage, partnership, whatever it is, it's 50-50, it's split, everything should be even, everybody should pull their weight. I'm going to tell you that's not true. It's just not true. And it's because of the profound differences between men and women and how they think and feel. And we're going to go through some of those because these are really important. Let's talk for a minute about what men bring to a relationship. And I'm going to be really blunt with you here, and I'm going to say men don't bring much. They just really don't. In fact, to be honest with you, most men view a relationship as the continuation of their single life with benefits. That's it. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't come with a desire to protect and provide, but you know, in a way, that's in our DNA to do that. Not all men can, but most men do, or at least have a desire to do that. And just as an aside, by the way, in a man's mind, a relationship begins when he says it does. In other words, when he proposes, or when he says, let's go steady, or he says, let's move in together, in his mind, that's when the relationship starts. And that'll be important a little bit later on when I'll explain how women tend to view things. So we've established men don't bring much. Now, women, on the other hand, this is a totally different thing, because what women bring to a relationship is huge. I have called it, in the past, I've called it a vision. Sometimes I've referred to it as a book. But basically what it has is the outline of how women view their relationship. And it includes dating, courtship, marriage, children, family, maybe career, extended family, home. All of those things are included in that vision or in that book in very specific chapters. Now, I'm going to tell you that not every woman's vision is the same. But I am going to tell you that every woman has that vision with those things, those specific things listed. If you look at it as being the book, they each have those chapters in their books. Now, I don't care whether they were born in Africa or the Middle East or in South America or China, wherever. I can tell you every single woman has that book. And despite what their culture tells them, and despite what custom tells them, if those customs don't line up with that book, you got an unhappy woman, or a rebellious woman, as some people may say. But I'm going to tell you that they have that pattern, that vision from the very beginning. And the importance of the vision is this, and that is, if there is anything in their life that varies significantly from what is in that vision, they feel emotional pain. And I'm also going to tell you that they will do everything that they can do, that they can possibly do, to get that vision to match what's going on in their lives. And we know that things happen out of order. Sometimes people have babies before they get married. Sometimes people have babies before they even decide whether they like each other or not. That happens, but I can tell you women are always trying to mold reality into that vision. Now, just to mention as to what women think about relationships, in a woman's mind, the relationship starts at the first date. Not only at the first date, I'm going to submit to you that it actually starts before the two of you even met. And if you want to test it, you can test it like this. Ask yourself the question, men, has my girlfriend or my wife ever given me grief about something that happened when we were dating? And our response was, hey, we were just dating. I didn't know whether we were going to go together then or not, as our excuse for things. But let me ask you this, men that are married, has your wife ever asked you or given you grief about something that happened before the two of you even met? And our response to that is, honey, we didn't even know each other. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't make a difference, not in a woman's mind. So I'm going to tell you, again, reinforce the opinion that a relationship's not an even playing field. We got men over here that bring nothing to the relationship, women that bring the whole pattern and the whole blueprint for the relationship to them. We have men that just want everything to go smooth, just like this. We don't want any change at all. We don't want any of this, we don't want any of this. But we have women on the other side that are constantly trying to mold everything in their lives into that vision. Now, uneven playing field, that's where we are. Now, let's talk about how we think and feel about things, because there's a huge difference there. Men are what I call binary, okay? With us, it's either this or that. It's black or white. It's fair, it's unfair. It's smart, it's dumb. Makes sense, doesn't make sense. Everything is binary to us. That's how we evaluate everything that we perceive. And we make little check marks. And whichever total has the most check marks, that's the way we go. And unless we have some overwhelming reason to do otherwise, that's the way we go. Now, when things don't go as we wish them to, and it doesn't fit our two-column paper, we basically only have two reactions to that. The first is anger, second is frustration. That's it. We get angry, we get frustrated. Now, women, on the other hand, don't evaluate things even close to the way we do as men. In fact, when they perceive something, and when I say perceive, that means they think it, they feel it, they see it, they hear it, they evaluate that through a lens that says, how does this make me feel? Not is it this or is it that, but how does it make me feel? And it's not this nebulous, funny, fuzzy feeling. It's a feeling against a specific checklist. Does it make me feel like I'm loved? Does it make me feel like I'm important? Does it make me feel like I'm desired, I'm desirable, I'm appreciated, I'm protected, I'm provided for? And if whatever they perceive fails that test, then they only have one reaction. Unlike men, where we get angry or frustrated, it's emotional pain. That's what they feel, emotional pain. Now, if it happens a lot, it may sound like anger and look like anger when they're talking to us, but I'm going to tell you at the heart of it, it's never anger. It's emotional pain. That's one of the reasons that feminism has obscured the differences between men and women, because we do not feel the same things. We feel anger and frustration, women feel emotional pain. Now, that's critical for us to understand, because many a time we've said something or done something, and we turn around and we look at our wives and we see that the spirit has just left them, they're crushed. Something's wrong. What do? That's what we say. What did I do? What did I say? And we're probably not going to find out right then. We may find out a couple of days later, and I'll explain why that's true too. But we just realized we got a reaction. Something's happened. The temperature in the room has gone down 10 degrees, and I don't know what happened. Well, part of what you're learning here is going to explain that phenomena to you. Now, let's talk about differences in the way we communicate, because men and women communicate for totally different reasons. Men use conversation as the means to an end. We don't talk unless we're going to make a point. And we don't want to get interrupted while we're talking, because then we have to start all over again, and we get angry and we get frustrated because of it. And not only do we want to make a point, but we talk to persuade. We want that person that's listening to us to either accept our opinion or just acknowledge that it's a good idea. And that's basically it. Now, I can tell you, when men get together and they talk, what do we say? We got 4 questions. You know, what do you do? Where do you work? You know, who are you voting for? What's your favorite team? And unless somebody has a really funny story, we're pretty much done, conversation-wise. That's it. Women, on the other hand, converse very differently. And there is something extremely important that's going on in their conversation that we need to understand is happening. Instead of using conversation as a means to an end, like we do as men, to women, conversation is the end. It's the act of speaking that's important. Now, as I mentioned, when a woman speaks, there are several things going on. And when I say when women speak, I don't mean when they say, what do you want for dinner, or where do you want to go this weekend? When they just start talking, and all of us know when that is. There are three things that happen. And I'm going to pause here for just a second and say, you know what? Carve this in stone. If you got a stone close to you, bring it to your lap and carve this down, because this is so important. Three things happen when women talk. The first thing is they're telling us how they think and feel. Telling us how they think and feel. The second thing is they are updating their relationship. In other words, we start out the conversation like this, but as the conversation goes on, when it's over, that relationship is up to date. The third thing is they're getting an emotional release from that. Now, you may have watched your wife or your girlfriend talk to other women before. And if you've ever watched it or listened to them talk to their mom on the phone or whatever, it's just blah, 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 blah. Just goes around in circles and circles and circles, sometimes even covers the same thing over again. I'm going to tell you, even in that case, when they're talking to other women, that those three things are happening. But not only to them, it's happening to the women they're talking to. They're able to talk about how they think and feel about something. They're updating their relationship, so when they get up from the table or hang up the phone, their relationship is up to date. And then they get an emotional release from that. Now, I'm going to tell you, men, that's foreign to us. We don't talk like that. We don't get an emotional release. We don't think in terms of updating a relationship. That is a foreign concept to us. But I'm going to tell you, every time your wife starts to speak and you cut that off, those three things don't happen. First of all, she walks away from that not having said what she's thinking and feeling. Secondly, when she walks away from you, your relationship is just like this. It is not updated. And just as a side note, we'll talk about it in a minute. If you think intimacy is going to happen when that relationship is like that, you're just kidding yourself. It's not going to happen. Third thing that happens, no emotional release from that. Now, I'm going to tell you what happens. Without that emotional release, that goes on long enough, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to blow up or they're going to melt down. And you don't want to be around when that happens. You just don't. Now, here's the funny thing. When I have couples sitting in front of me, and I ask the wife, I say, you know what, if you could change one thing about your husband, what would you do? And they'll tell me, if nothing else comes out of this counseling but one thing, I'll be happy. And I'll say, what is that? She said, my husband never listens to me. Really? And I look over at the husband and he says, that's not right. I listen to you all the time. She says, no, you don't. He says, yes, I do. In fact, he says, you know what? The thing I would change is that you never tell me what you want. And I look over at his wife, and his wife says, I tell you all the time. Look over at him, and he says, oh, really? When was the last time you told me something? She says, 40 minutes ago. And of course, he says, what? What did you tell me? Number one thing, number one complaint of women, as far as I'm concerned, that's probably the number one reason that we have women that nag us and are rebellious and generally unloving, certainly not intimate, is because we don't listen. Now, we say we do as men. I'm going to give you 4 ways that prove that we don't. And this is how we cut off those communications. Number one, we either ignore it or we put it off. We say, oh dear, the football game's on. Can we talk about this later? We just shut it off, cut it off. Or if we just ignore it, same thing, just cut it off. The next thing we do that cuts off that communication is that when it tends to be pointed at us, guess what we do? We start rationalizing and justifying our behavior. And the thought in our mind is, honey, if you just knew what was going on, you wouldn't feel the way you do. I'm going to tell you, that never works. It's a fool's errand because that's not what she's hearing. What she's hearing is, you don't care how I think and feel. That's not what we said, but that's what they hear. You know, the third thing that we do, because as I mentioned, women just talk about what they think and feel. Sometimes they think and feel things that we don't agree with, or that we think may be silly or outrageous in some way. So what do? We jump in and criticize or judge whatever it is that they're saying. And I can tell you, when we do that, it doesn't matter what we say, because whatever it is we say, that's not what they hear. What they hear is, you don't appreciate me, you don't value me, you don't care about how I think and feel. And that communication is cut off. Now, the last thing that we do to stop that communication, and we're really not to blame for this, we just need to be careful with it. And that is, if we sense there is a problem, we'll try to fix it. We'll come in with suggestions. Well, did you try this? Did you try that? You should have done this. You should have done that. And try and fix that problem. Now, why do we do that as men? That's how we live our lives. That's how we talk to other men. If we sense a problem in a conversation, that conversation will not end until that problem's solved. But when women are talking to us about something and we jump in and try and fix it, which really actually is in our DNA, because as men, we're fix-it people. When we jump in and try to fix it, that's not what they hear. They hear that we don't care about how they think and feel. Now, I'm going to tell you that women will ask if they need a solution. Don't offer one unless they ask. But I also want to give you a warning. When they do ask, it's a minefield. And you need to understand that, because she may have already thought about what she wants to do. And she wants to hear your side. Here's the easy way to get away from that. Just say, dear, I don't know. What would you do about that? Throw the ball back to them, let them do their thing, and then we can either agree with them, disagree with them, whatever we're going to do. But I'm going to tell you, unless we get this down, those three things that are happening, and understand what it is and allow it to happen, because it's the number one complaint with women, but it's the easiest thing that men have to do. All we have to do is listen and nod our heads and acknowledge it. And when they ask for our opinion, we give it. But until then, we just say, wow, that must be tough, or wow, that sounds really good. So that they can get not only out whatever it is they're thinking and feeling, they're updating their relationship with us when that conversation's over, and they get the emotional release. Now, I'm going to tell you, men also have another problem when it comes to conversations between themselves and their wives. And that is that we always tend to get stuck on the thing. And I'm going to talk about that briefly to explain what I mean. Two quick stories. First story, I had a couple in that was describing the fact that they'd had a big fight. And I always ask them if we could go through and deconstruct that so we could see how we could do that better. And the wife was explaining that she had just had one of the worst days at work she had ever had. It was horrible. And she's telling me that she's telling her husband, I got there early so I could get extra work done. None of my coworkers showed up. We got slammed with customers, and some of them have some very complicated problems. We got so far behind, we didn't have time to go to the bathroom. We didn't have time to eat. I'm starving right now. We couldn't get a hold of a supervisor to get down and help us. It was the worst day I'd had in my life. Now, his response to that was, that's crazy. There's no reason in the world why you should go without food. Anybody knows you pick up the telephone and you can have delivery done, or you could send somebody out for some food, and nobody should be afraid to call a supervisor or a boss or a manager and say, get the heck down here and get some, help us out here. We're in a real mess. Well, that's when the fight began. And the husband's still sitting there thinking, what did I do? And I looked at her and she says, you know what? I know all that stuff. I know that we could have ordered out. I know that we could have sent somebody out to get our food. I knew that we could call a supervisor. I knew all those things. All I wanted my husband to do was know that I had the worst day that I had ever had in the last 10 years I worked for that company. I didn't want his advice. I didn't want his criticism. I didn't want any of that. We got stuck on the thing. He got stuck on the thing. It wasn't about the thing. It wasn't about the eating. It wasn't about the bathrooms. It wasn't about the crowd. It was how it made her feel. Second story, Super Bowl day. Wife doesn't like football, so she goes and cleans out a closet. Husband's watching with the family, watching the football game. She loads all that stuff out into the garage. And she walks through the house and says, you know, on your next available time, would you please take that stuff out to the trash? She says, sure. So I'll do it at halftime. Well, we all watch Super Bowl, and we know that more happens at halftime than it does the rest of the game. So passes by that. She comes back through. Stuff's still out in the garage. He says, look, I'll get it after the football game. Well, if you watch the Super Bowl, you know there's always stuff going on after the football game. So she comes back later on in the night, and she says, will you please take that stuff out? Now, typical guy, he's sitting there thinking, that stuff is as good as gone. I am not going to go to bed tonight with that stuff out in the garage. It's not going to happen. So he tells her, I'll get to it when I get to it. And then the fight begins. And his position, in fact, I could see him on the couch bowing up over this, thinking to himself, I was going to take that trash out. I was just going to do it on my schedule. But I can tell you what she was thinking. She was thinking, you don't love me, you don't appreciate me, you don't value the work that I've done. And he's thinking, it's just trash. It's all about the thing. It's never about the thing. It's always about the way that thing makes them feel. Now, let's talk about women that nag. That's our favorite word for it. We call it nagging, okay? And nagging is when they come to us in a critical or judgmental way. Now, I'm going to tell you this is a red flag for men, because we have to learn to begin to hear that in a different way. Because as men, we're hardwired to view nagging as contempt, as though you were talking to a child. And we're sitting there thinking in our male brains, nobody talks to me like that. My boss doesn't talk to me like that. My friends don't talk to me like that. My coworkers don't talk to me like that. You're not going to talk to me like that. We are hardwired to flinch whenever we hear judgment or criticism. Now, we're going to have to learn to listen to what's going on. Because remember, it's not about that thing, whatever that thing is that we are being nagged about. It's how that thing makes them feel. Now, I'm going to tell you an unfortunate thing about women. They only have one arrow in their quiver when it comes to addressing us, and that's to be critical and judgmental. Don't know why that is, but I'm just going to tell you that's it. In fact, one of the things I'd like for women to get out of this, and I tell my couples, the females in the couples that I counsel, the one thing I hope that happens as a result of this counseling is that you learn to be more accurate when you decide to criticize and judge, not to concentrate on the thing, but how that thing makes you feel. In other words, when you leave all your clothes and the towels at the bottom of the bathroom and walk away, it makes me feel like you don't love me and you don't appreciate me. Be specific about that so that we understand. But I'm going to tell you, most women don't do that. So we have to resist that temptation to flinch when we first hear criticism and judgment. Now, generally as men, we'll do one of two things. And sometimes it's the women that do it and sometimes the men. But we make a choice. We stonewall. And when we stonewall, we're doing it for two reasons. We're doing it either because we're so overwhelmed with what we're hearing that we just don't know what to say. The second thing is we take the noble approach, the high road, and we say, you know what, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to make this worse. So we think we're doing a good thing. But I'm going to tell you, it doesn't work. Because women are hardwired in their minds to accept stonewalling as hostility. In other words, you're cutting me off, you're trying to punish me. Okay? When we are being criticized and judged, we need to understand that certain things are happening. And now I'm going to propose something to you. And the first time I learned this, I came across it, I totally rejected it. It didn't make any sense to me at all. Second time I ran into it, I understood that there was kind of a biblical principle behind it. So I kind of accepted it as a matter of faith. Now I accept it as being absolutely true. Another one of those things you can carve at stone. When women come at us in critical and judgmental ways, they are trying to draw closer to us. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive. It did to me the first time I heard it. That just doesn't make sense. But I'm going to tell you that it is. Because whatever that thing is that they're criticizing or judging us for is attached to something that makes them feel like they're not loved, appreciated, valued, or whatever. And we need to understand that. When our wives come at us and they're nagging, a red flag needs to go up in our mind. I got to pay attention to what's going on. Something's happening. I don't know what it is. Now, you know, in the course of a relationship, we all have grievances. And again, as men and women, we handle those grievances differently. And the way I like to characterize this, and this is not an original thought, I've heard this a number of times, but in men's heads, in their brains, they are full of compartments. And every experience that we have gets tucked away somewhere in one of those compartments. And it stays there. We don't think about it until something happens, and then we have to pull that out and deal with it. Now, it's very handy for men because when bad things happen to us, we're able to stick those things in those compartments and go on about our business. And that's very handy for us, and we need to be able to do that. But I'm going to tell you, for women, it's totally different. All of their grievances go into a bowl, and they are all mixed together. And I'm going to tell you that those grievances not only go over the last years of the relationship, but back to the dating time, and as we talked about earlier, it may even go all the way back to the time before the two of you met. Now, one of my colleagues was kind enough to explain that to me as to why that happens. And she explained it like this, that women biologically, whenever they have an experience, it's attached to an emotion. And whenever they feel that emotion, it pulls up all of the different experiences that are related to that emotion. That's why you can begin having a conversation about something that has hurt your wife's feelings. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, she mentions 20 things from different periods of your life and from periods of your life before the two of you met. Why? Because all of those memories, all of those experiences, unlike the ones we've got stored away in our heads, they're all attached to that emotion. And when the women feel that emotion, all those memories come back. Very different as to how we handle things. All those grievances stay in that bowl and they swirl around and around, and whatever splashes out, that's what we deal with. That's why we always had the feeling that we never seem, as men, we never seem to get over something or past something. Why? We got it locked away in a compartment. They've got it in a bowl mixed up with everything else. Now, women, just as an aside, if you want to test this compartment thing for men, have you ever sat there when the two of you are watching TV and you look over to your husband and you say, what are you thinking about? And he says nothing. Nothing? Really? He's in his nothing box. We have a box in our brain that has absolutely nothing in it. And we go there a lot. And we just sit there in that box. It's empty. Now, I know that women always want to get into that box and they want to put carpet and drapes and color and all that kind of stuff in it. But it's no, you stay out of my box. We have that box. Now, to close this out, I want to talk about intimacy for just a minute. And I'm going to tell you, intimacy is a broad umbrella and it's worthy of a lot more time than I'm going to give it right now. But I can tell you, if relationships are not going good at the moment, the first thing to go is intimacy. Now, I'm going to tell you that I've talked to couples that intimacy was so far gone that the idea of even touching each other or holding hands was repugnant. But I'm going to tell you that can be restored. But I'm also going to say, unless we're able to take the things that we've talked about today and be able to put those in practice, that intimacy is going to be a strange thing for us. We're not going to see it. Let's go back for a moment to the time we were talking about what happens to women when they're talking. Part of that is updating that relationship. If your relationship is not up to date with your wife, there will be no intimacy. And I'm just going to tell you that's it. Now, men and women, we have needs for intimacy and a desire for intimacy that they're totally different. And very often this can become a stumbling block. Usually it's the victim or a problem that results from a bad relationship. Sometimes it can be the cause of a bad relationship. But let me describe it like this. The desire for intimacy is like a string of Christmas lights. If I give one to a man and one to a woman, and I light them all up right, and she comes over and steps on one of his bulbs, and it goes out, all the rest of them are shining bright. Intimacy is still on the table. But if he comes over and he steps on one of her Christmas lights, they all go out. If you can keep that vision in your mind, you'll understand why there are times when she says, you know what? I just don't feel like it. Doesn't mean she doesn't have a headache. It doesn't mean that she's too tired. It's because she doesn't feel like having intimacy with someone whose relationship is not up to date with her. Now, I'm also going to give you one more tip, men. Of all the women I've talked to, they tell me they value non-sexual touching and closeness over sex. Carve it in stone if you want to. I'm just going to tell you it's important. Foreplay is not 15 minutes. It's a week. You need to understand that. While you're working on communications, and just remember, communications is so important. And it's not a question of tools. Lots of people ask me, can you just give me tools? And I say, no, I can't. It's not really about tools. It's about understanding the person that you're with. If you can understand them, then you can communicate. Your behavior will follow. You don't have to have a list of tools. You don't have to have a list of things to remember to do. All you got to do, once you understand who you're talking to, your behavior will follow. Now, I'm also going to tell you, if you reach that critical point in your relationship, you need to go see a counselor. I'm convinced that very few couples can work these things out on their own. You need to see a counselor. You need to see a Christian counselor. Two reasons. The first is they're not going to give you any advice that's contrary to the scriptures. Second thing is they don't subscribe to all of this hogwash that's going on in our culture today. What you're going to get is the truth, and you're going to get some good help. Also, when you're looking for a counselor, do not look for a referee. Referees are of no value in counseling because all you end up at the end of the day is with a score, and nothing ever changes. Find a counselor that is a teacher, someone who will teach you what you need to know to have a good and growing relationship. Now, I'm going to tell you that I have prayed over the preparation of this material that you've heard today. I'm also going to pray over the DVDs that I send out as well. My hopes being that there are things that we have talked about today that could potentially save your family and save your marriage. And I hope that's the case. But I just want you to know my prayers are with you, and I only wish you the best of success in the future. Now I'm talking to the young men in the audience, and I've got some very special information with you on relationships. You know, our idea of relationships as men is shaped by a number of different things. It's shaped by our popular culture. It's shaped on what we see in television, what we see in movies, and particularly what we see on social media as well. Even our education is designed to kind of shape our feelings about men and women and about relationships. But unfortunately, one of the outgrowths of that is that we blur the differences between men and women. You know, I grew up in the 60s, and that was the day of feminism. And feminism worked famously for what it was designed to do. It was designed to get women into the workplace. And the premise that it was set on was this, that women can do the same thing that men can do. And if you ask a feminist, they'll say even better. And as I mentioned, it worked. That's why there are more women in college than there are men. That's why there's more women in the workforce than there are men, because it was very successful. But I'm going to tell you, it was disastrous when it came to relationships, because the underlying assumption there is that if women and men can do the same things, then they must think and feel the same way. And I'm going to tell you, nothing could be further from the truth than that. There are some profound differences between men and women. Now, I'm going to tell you that we're gifted with different attributes and different knowledge. You know, men, we have the desire to protect and provide. And in a way, that's kind of in our DNA. Now, not all men can do that successfully, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to and that we don't try to do it. But I'm going to tell you that women are gifted with something totally different. And by the time they get to be an adolescent or a young woman, what they're gifted with is in full bloom. And this is what I call it. Sometimes I refer to it as a vision, sometimes as a book. But each of those have parts. And here's what's in that vision. That vision includes dating, courtship, marriage, family, children, home, maybe career. And what's in that vision is a very clear idea as to what their life should be like and what those different parts of their life should look like, the dating, the courtship, the marriage, etc. They have a very clear view as to what that should look like. Now, when do they get that? Well, I've heard that they get it as early as 5 years old. Moms have told me that. Adult women have told me that. I think it comes at puberty, but the fact of the matter is they all have it. And just as an aside on this, it doesn't make any difference where a woman is born in this world. They all have the vision. I don't care if they were born in South America, if they were born in Africa, in the Middle East, China, whatever. Every woman has this vision. Now, from vision to vision to vision, they're not exactly the same, but they still include the same categories: the dating, the courtship, the marriage, etc. Now, I'm going to tell you that they're born with this vision. Quite often they find out because of their culture that that vision is not acceptable, and they have a choice. Either they go with their culture, which means that they're going to be miserable for most of their life, always unhappy, or they can be rebellious. In a lot of cultures, that's not a good thing. So keep that in mind, the vision. They all have it. Now, let's kind of take a detour just a minute, and let's talk about the life cycle of a relationship. And some of you that have already started dating, you'll probably recognize this already. And this is the way it starts. In the very beginning, we find someone that when we're in their physical presence, we have this wonderful feeling. It's so wonderful that we'll do everything we can stay connected. We'll text, we'll phone, we'll do all these things just to stay connected and have that feeling. And that feeling is so great and so intense. At some point, we decide, you know what? I want to experience this all the time. So what do? We get engaged, we get married, we move in together, we go steady, whatever the arrangement is, so that we can experience this all the time. Now, what happens is we're rolling along and we're having this relationship. We begin to notice some things about our partner that we're not crazy about. What do we do with that? Well, we shove it under the rug. Why? Because it's all about the feeling at that point. So we shove those things under the rug, going along with our relationship. And all of a sudden, one day, one of us, the other, both, wake up one day and say, you know what? I don't have that feeling anymore. I don't. And we presume that, okay, if I don't have that feeling anymore, that means my partner's withholding something from me. And because of that, we begin to get contentious and defensive in our communications back and forth. Because, like I said, we think our partner's withholding something. Not only that, but those things that we swept under the rug earlier, those come out. And now they become a problem. Now, that's what I call a critical point in the relationship. And there's something dramatic that has to change. If we don't do anything, what happens is we create an environment that gives us permission to seek that feeling elsewhere. How do we do that? We do it through texting an old boyfriend, old girlfriend, pornography. It can be any number of things. Seeking that feeling elsewhere. Now, I'm going to tell you in a nutshell what has to happen, but that's not the most important thing at the moment. But I don't want to leave you without knowing what that is. Up until that critical point in a relationship, here's what's been going on. We've been waking up every morning wondering what our partner is going to do for us that brings joy to our lives. Here's what has to change. We have to wake up in the morning wondering what we can do for our partner to bring joy to their life. Because if we can do that, that's how it reflects back in us. Now, that's based on the idea that whatever it was that started the relationship by itself is not enough to sustain it for a lifetime. Now, here we are, young men, and you're sitting there thinking, I know, I would be. Why are we talking about a lifelong, long-term relationship? I'm only a teenager, or I'm only a young man. Why are we even bothering with this? Well, there's several reasons for it. The first reason is women do not enter into short-term relationships. They just don't. It's not in that vision. There is nothing in that vision that says, okay, this is what a short-term relationship should look like. Doesn't exist. Now, does that mean that every man that a woman goes out with, she plans to marry? No, it doesn't at all. But the fact of the matter is, there is no plan in there for a short-term relationship. Every relationship is being evaluated against that vision as though it was going to be long-term. Now, here's what's going on in our minds as men. We're thinking, okay, I like this girl, let's see what happens. So we just go day to day. Okay, we'll see where this goes. Why? We don't have a plan. Now, you might ask me, why is this important? Because here we are as a teenager or 20, 21-year-old. Why is this important that we need to know about long-term relationships now? Well, I'm going to tell you, every relationship that you enter into impacts the rest of your life. How do I know that? Well, I know that because I talk to people that have been married for years. They're having serious problems. And when we go back and talk to about their history, we see this long series of relationships that got up to that critical point. They failed to do anything about it, and they walked away from that sad and disillusioned and hurt, believing that they picked the wrong person, not knowing that there is no such thing as the right person. When we pick them, we make them the right person. So what happens is they end up living their life. Every time they see something that looks like the critical point of a relationship is changing, they bail. And so they end up with a history of failed relationships. And I'm just going to tell you that has an impact on your later life, a dramatic impact. Now, when she gets together with us in a relationship, she's reading ahead in that vision. She is looking at each stage of the relationship. She's going a little bit further, looking ahead, what's the next step? As guys, what are we doing? We're just biding time. We don't know what's going on. Now, let's say that we get to that critical relationship, or that critical point in the relationship. And you as a guy say, you know what, I don't have that feeling anymore. I'm just going to walk away. And we do. We just leave. We walk away. What happens to the woman? Well, I'm going to tell you, unless you've been beating her or otherwise abusing her, she's going to be crushed. Why? Because there's nothing in her vision about a short-term relationship. So if we walk away, we've done damage that's going to last the rest of her life. Now here's the other thing. What if the girl walks away? Well, here's what happens. If the girl walks away, what's the guy going to do? He's going to go off, find another girl, and ruin her life too. Why? Because he doesn't know what it was he should have done or what he did do that caused that relationship to go bad. So he's going to make the same mistake over and over and over again until he learns. Now, most of you at some point or another have had your parents tell you, I don't want you to date right now. I don't want you to date until you're 16 or you're 18 or whatever it is. What do we think about that? Well, we think there's one reason they don't want us to do it. They are committed to us not having fun. They absolutely want to make sure that as kids we don't have any fun. I'm going to tell you that is the furthest thing from a parent's mind. The reason they tell you to wait is because they have been there and they've done it. And they understand that relationships are real and that people get hurt, seriously hurt. And they don't want you to have to not only feel that pain, but suffer the whole disruption in your life, in your school, in your social life and all that. They don't want to see that. They don't want that for you. They want you to be happy. So remember that when they try to discourage you from dating, it has nothing to do with you not having fun. Now, let's talk about something else here. Let's talk about sex. You know, the culture that we live in is just oozing and dripping with sex. It's almost like it's a no-fault thing. No consequences, no hang-ups, no need for relationships, etc., etc. I'm going to tell you that it's not that way at all. Now, I'm not a believer in premarital sex. Why? It's not biblical. That's the number one reason. But I'm going to tell you, for a lot of people, that's not reason enough. And you know what? Depending on how they're raised, I kind of get that. But let's talk a little bit further about what really is happening. First of all, it adds nothing to a relationship. It just doesn't. In fact, the truth of the matter is, all having sex does in a relationship is raise the stakes and consequences for failure. That's all it does. I can promise you that sex will not make a bad relationship better. Never has. I've never talked to anybody that has confirmed that, oh yeah, we had a terrible relationship till we had sex and all of a sudden it was better. No, it doesn't work that way. I'm also going to tell you there's some very practical reasons for not engaging in sex before you get married. And I'm going to give you four things that I want you to be aware of. The first thing has to do with sexually transmitted diseases. Now, if you're in high school or junior high, you probably have had the talk about sexually transmitted diseases. Those are diseases that you can get by having unprotected sex. Let me tell you, you can also get those diseases when you're protected as well. Now, when I was a young man, when I was a teenager, there were 3 STDs. We called it VD. We called it venereal disease back in that day. And guess what? All 3 of those were curable. Now we are here decades later. There are 39 different STDs. And guess what? 3 of them are curable. And not only that, those 3 are becoming less and less curable because they're becoming resistant to antibiotics. And I'm also going to tell you this. You can get cancer or cause somebody to have cancer. Infertility is also a possibility because the majority of these diseases don't have any symptoms to them. Now, I just recently discovered that there are dating sites where you get on the site in an effort to look for a mate that are for people that have HIV, for people that have Hep C, and for people that have herpes. Now, why would you have a dating site for people that have the same disease as you? It's because nobody wants to go through the heartbreak of falling in love with someone only to be rejected because they have a lifelong incurable disease. Can you imagine the pain in that? Can you imagine just having a first date would be incredibly difficult? Give you reason number 3, pregnancy. I guess we all know that's a possibility. So what happens if you get pregnant? Well, I'm going to tell you that that is not in the vision for a woman. Most women do not intend to have children out of wedlock. It's not in that vision because you got dating, you got courtship, you got marriage, you got family, you got children. There's an order there. Now, we know in reality, things don't always work out like we want, and they don't always work out in that order. But I'm going to tell you this, anything that deviates from that vision is going to cause that woman emotional pain. In fact, they spend their lives trying to squeeze whatever reality they're stuck with into that vision. And if it varies significantly, reality and vision, they feel emotional pain from that. And it'll continue for the rest of their lives. Now, one last thing in regards to that. Oxytocin. What is that? Oxytocin is called the bonding hormone. When women are nursing their newborn babies, their body floods with oxytocin. And it's important. That's what bonds mother and child together. Now, here's the thing. When women have sex, it releases oxytocin, and they bond with whoever they're with. Now, you may think, guys, we just get off scot-free. This is a one-time thing, and we just move on about our business. But I'm going to tell you, you can walk away, but she's bonded. And there's going to be a problem there. There is no such thing as no consequence sex. Now, as far as relationship goes, my biggest advice is don't be in a hurry. You've got a lifetime to spend looking for someone, being with someone, and enjoying their company. It's very possible right now to enjoy the company of women and your male friends without getting entangled in romantic relationships. Now, in our next session, it's going to be designed directly to speak directly to adult men. And these are men that are either between relationships, or they're married, or they're living with someone, and things are not going well. They need to know what it is that makes women tick and what makes relationships work. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. But I'm just going to tell you, if you enter into a relationship without understanding the principles that we're going to talk about in the next session, you're going to have a very difficult time. So stay with me, watch this next session, and hopefully the relationship that you have will be better. It will continue to grow. Relationships only go two ways. They're either growing or they're deteriorating. We men, we want everything to be just like this, and it doesn't happen. So join me in the next session. Thank you. This session is directed totally toward preteen young men. I want to speak to you directly. You're not too young to begin to understand some things about men and women and about relationships. You know, most of you are in school right now, and your teachers go out of their way to make sure that boys and girls are treated the same. And that's very important. That's the way they maintain order. That's the way they maintain a learning environment that's conducive. And they do that, and that's okay. In fact, when you think about it, boys and girls are all learning the same subjects. We're all doing the same activities, and we're all sharing the same space. So it just makes sense. We're all together, we all learn together, and we all think and act alike at this age. Now, your teachers are also teaching you some other things too that are really important. They're teaching you about fairness, and they're teaching you about sharing and teaching you about being polite. And these are really important social skills that you need to learn. But there's something else too that you could be learning, and it's not really your teacher's job to teach this. This is kind of a mom and dad thing. But I'm going to do my best to try and explain some things to you that perhaps mom and dad haven't talked about yet, but I think that they'll understand and accept some of the things that we're talking about. You know, just because boys and girls are treated alike doesn't mean that they are. In fact, young men, I'm going to tell you that girls do not think like us at all. Not only do they not think like us, They don't feel the same way we do. They just don't. Why? Well, let me tell you something. Young girls are gifted with some special knowledge about getting along with boys in relationships and getting along in life. And a special knowledge that most of us as boys don't have. Now, how do I know this? Well, I know this because I've talked to moms for years now, in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, and they not only tell me that they have this special knowledge, they tell me they got it when they were very young. Some of them have told me that they even got it at the age of 5. Now, what is this special knowledge? This special knowledge has a pattern for how women believe they should be treated. And it's very clear to them. And I'm going to explain to you. We call it a vision sometimes. They have this vision of what it's like to be in a world with young men and other young women. And I'm going to explain to you what this vision has. The first thing in that vision is they believe they should be treated as though they are loved. And that's very important. Boys, not so much. You know, we like the idea of being loved, but we would rather be admired. We would rather have somebody tell us, you know what, good job. Can't believe you did that. That was great. That was absolutely wonderful. But little girls are different. Now, even though they may respond to the praise and the admiration and so forth, I'm going to tell you deep down inside, it all has to do with them feeling loved. And I'm going to tell you something else about little girls too, that they want to feel like they're valued and appreciated for who they are. Now, a little different from boys, you know, we like to be respected and we like to be told that we're really doing a good job, but women want to feel valued and appreciated. Now, they also want to feel safe and protected. No matter how raucous it gets in the classroom or on the playground, in their heart of hearts, they want to know that they're safe and they want to know that they're protected. Now, here's what happens, young men, when we say things or do things to little girls that make them feel like they're not loved, that they're not appreciated, or that they're not safe. They only have one reaction to that. They feel emotional pain. In other words, their feelings are hurt because of that. Now, we may not understand when we look at their reaction because we think that they're mad or they're upset with us or they're being mean to us or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, when we do those things or say those things, we hurt their feelings. Now, that's different from us boys. That's totally different. Because when things don't go our way or somebody offends us, we get mad or we get frustrated. But we don't usually get our feelings hurt. That's different. But when we talk to little girls and we tease them or we belittle them, their feelings are hurt. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story about something that happened to me when I was in the 2nd grade. I had a little girlfriend. Actually, she was just a friend, and her name was Rosalind Voorhees. And I knew that she liked me. I liked her, kind of, but I really knew that she liked me because I would sit in different places in the cafeteria on different days, and she would always sit 2 seats away from me, no matter where I sat. It didn't make any difference. And we would kind of talk across the table. We were kind of friendly, but I knew that she really liked me. Well, one day I opened my lunch sack, and I saw my lunch, and I thought, oh no, I can't eat this. And so I crumpled up my sack, and I was just going to sit there and drink my milk. And she looked over at me, and she said, Lee, would you like half of my sandwich? And I said, well, sure. And you know, I knew what it was because I see her every day. She has the same sandwich. It's always on white bread, always has the crust cut off of it. And you can see a line of what looks like grape jelly on that. I thought, this is great. So she hands me half that sandwich. And I tell her, well, I don't even think I told her thanks. But at any rate, when I got the sandwich, I put it in my mouth, and I took a big bite of it, and it was like, oh my goodness, what is in that sandwich? I can't believe it. This is terrible. And I turned around and looked at her right in the face, and I said, what did you put in this sandwich? And she said, it's just grape jelly and cream cheese. Cream cheese? Who puts cream cheese on a jelly sandwich? And I looked over at her, and the spirit had just gone out of her face. She was crushed. Her face was red. She had tears coming down her eyes. And I just sat there mumbling, I can't believe you did this. You didn't tell me you had cream cheese in it. And she got upset. She grabbed her lunch, and she made a beeline across the room to where the teacher sat at her little table. And when she got over there, I could see the teacher bend down and look at her, and I could tell they were talking. And then I got the glance. The teacher looked straight at me, and she did this. And I thought, I don't know what this is about, but I headed over there. And as soon as I got within arm's reach of her, she reached over and grabbed my skinny little arm. And you know where that fat is that moms grab and pinch when they're mad at you? She grabbed it, and she was pinching hard. And she got down in my face, and she told me, I can't believe you did that to that little girl. And I'm thinking, what did I do? I mean, she gave me a sandwich and didn't tell me what was in it. And it turned out to be something I really don't like. And she got closer in my face and said, I cannot believe what you've done. You have just crushed that little girl. And so she told me, you go sit over there. And she sent me over to the corner for the rest of the lunch hour. Well, I can tell you I was really glad when school was over that day because I could still feel the tension in the air. Would Rosalind look at me? No. Sat on the other side of the room, wouldn't have anything to do with me. So I'm sitting there, my self-righteous self, thinking, you know, I'm suffering all this because she deceived me and fed me something I didn't want to eat. Well, I was glad when school was out, walked home. Now, this was back in the day when if you messed up during school, your teacher went to the office and called your mom and told you what they did. And when I got home and I opened that door, my mom grabbed me in that same place my teacher had grabbed me, which was already hurting, and started squeezing, and she read me the riot act about what I had done. Now it's kind of starting to sink in to me. She had made an offer of generosity to me. Had I accepted that and thanked her, she would have felt appreciated, valued, maybe even loved. But I didn't do that. I just stepped right in the middle of it in my angry, boyish way and just crushed that little girl's feelings. And I'm going to tell you, she never did talk to me again, never sat by me again. But here's the point. What I did to that little girl hurt her deeply. When she communicated that to her teacher knew exactly how she felt because she's a woman herself. When she called my mother and my mother got a hold of me when I walked through the front door and let me have it, why did she do that? She understood because she is a woman too. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about little girls our age or we're talking about moms or whether we're talking about teachers. They're all the same way. You know, when our moms get mad at us and they sound so angry because of something that we did, I'm going to tell you it's not anger. We're sitting there thinking, okay, we didn't clean up our room, we didn't take out the trash. That's what we're thinking. But you know what Mom is thinking? Now, she looks like she's mad, but here's what she's thinking. You don't know, son, how much I love you, how much I want the best for you, how much I care for you. And what you did made me feel like you don't love me, you don't care for me, and you don't value me. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret right now. If you can learn this and put this into effect, you're going to be fighting off little girls for the rest of your life. They will swarm all around you. Moms will love you, teachers will love you, and you're going to have a very happy life. But you need to understand this. Now, for you older preteens, I want you to hang on to the next session, because we're going to expand on this a little bit, and we're going to talk about boyfriends and girlfriends. So stay with me for that. Hello, my name's Lee Culver, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. When I first started in the counseling business, I worked a lot in the fields of drug addiction and also criminal behavior. And I did that kind of institutional work for a number of years. When I decided to go out on my own, though, and open my own practice, I was immediately besieged with something that I was not at all ready to handle. The people that came through my door were people that were married, living together, that basically had come to the end of their rope as far as their relationships were concerned. In fact, I'd even go so far to say that most of them, one person or the other, maybe even both, had one foot out the door when they came in. Had one couple tell me, Lee, we've got a manila folder on our front seat of our car, and it has our divorce papers in it. And we're just hoping that there's one more chance that we can fix this. Now, obviously, I was at a handicap at that point and didn't know what it was that I needed to do. I thought at first, well, you know, I can be a referee. But then when you think about that, a referee, basically all they do is keep score and call penalties. So at the end of the game, if you want to call it like that, you don't end up with anything except a score. Nothing ever changes. And I knew that was not what I wanted to do. Now, I noticed that of the couples that were coming to me, and in my later research found out that this is not too far off base, that there are a number of different groups of couples out there. Now, there's one little segment of the whole universe of couples that intuitively knows what to do when a relationship goes bad. And they just do it, and they live happily ever after. I usually don't see those people because they never come to counseling. There's another little sliver of couples out there that think to themselves, you know what, it should not be this hard. There's something we don't know, something we don't understand, and we need to find that out. So what do? We get on the internet, we read some books, we go to a marriage seminar, we go see a counselor just to find out what it is that we don't know. Now, the vast majority of couples fall into two groups. One half of that group says, you know what, this is too much trouble, I quit. And they leave, and they go off and ruin somebody else's life. The other half of that group says, you know what, we don't believe in divorce, so we're just going to be unhappy for the rest of our lives. And we all know that. We know people like that, and we don't want to spend the rest of our lives like that. So the question for me is, how do I help? What do I do? Well, I decided just to dive headfirst into whatever research I could get my hands on. And I spent a lot of time studying and listening, reading, to find out everything that I could about relationships. And I didn't pursue any of the pop culture stuff. This was from people who had spent their lifetimes studying relationships, people with biblical backgrounds that studied relationships and had experience to know what works and what does not work. One of the things that came to my mind after I read all this research and began to put the pieces together is, how did we get here? How did we end up in this place where we are when all this knowledge is out there, why do we end up with bad relationships? And I began to understand that a big part of it had to do with the fact that we don't understand. When I say we, I'm talking about men primarily. And this whole series is based on men. That there are a lot of things that we don't know about relationships, and we don't know about women. Now, I'm going to tell you that women, for the most part, are gifted with knowledge about relationships that we don't have as men. And this was a conclusion that I came through with all the research that I've been doing, is that we as men are at a tremendous disadvantage. We don't know what we don't know. I don't know if we ever knew. All I can say is that as men, if we were really fortunate to have a perfect role model, as a father to us and as a husband to our mothers, the best that we would be able to do would be to imitate that and hope that we got the same results. But the fact of the matter is, even if we imitated it, we would not know or understand what was going on. If we weren't fortunate enough to have a good role model, then we're just out of luck, because we really don't know what to do. Now, I'm going to tell you, our culture has a lot to do with how we view relationships and how we view the differences between men and women. And I can tell you feminism plays a part in it. We'll talk a little bit about feminism a little bit later on. But I'm going to tell you, men, there is a profound difference between the way men and women think, the way they perceive things, which means they hear it, they see it, they experience it, they think it. Differences in the way we perceive things, the way we process things, and also the way we communicate. And I'm also going to tell you that successful relationships really don't depend on feelings. It's not about feelings at all. It's about knowledge. It's about understanding the person that we're with. Now, it dawned on me, after trying to repair these relationships and help people navigate that, why should we have to wait until we're an adult and to find out the things that we need to know? So that's one of the reasons for this series, is I'm going to be talking to preteen young men. I'm also going to be talking to adolescent young men. And I'm also going to be talking to adult men as well. Now, I'm going to tell you, throughout this series, there's no original thoughts here. Everything that I'm telling you, I've gleaned from respected sources. And I'm also going to tell you that I make a lot of generalizations about things. I make generalizations about men, about women, about relationships, and I'm going to tell you I'm only right about 90% of the time. Why? Because there's always people out there that dance to a different tune. That's just the fact. I'm also going to tell you that not everybody, every man is all of this or all of that. Every woman is all of this or all of that. We all fit on a spectrum somewhere. So if what I'm saying doesn't precisely fit you, I don't want you to reject it, because there is a recognition that we all exist on a spectrum and we all have some differences. But for the main part, it's all the same. So I'd like for you to stick with me in this next session as we begin to talk to preteen young men. I'd like to give you a few final thoughts about some of the things that we've talked about and what some of the ramifications are for the future. I think all of us would agree that the most important thing in our lives, and the thing that people want the most, more than anything else, is a strong, growing, long-term relationship. I think we've also established already that in a lot of cases the deck is stacked against us. In a manner of speaking, we're kind of on an uneven playing field, particularly as men, because there are a lot of things that we don't understand about relationships. I think we've also established that there is some profound uniqueness in the way women think and feel and the way men think and feel. And those characteristics are unique to us as men and women. I'm going to tell you right now, we are in a desperate time of confusion about who men and women are and how we relate to each other in relationships. You know, in elementary school, teachers cannot address their children as boys and girls. They must say students. When I was young, we were boys and girls. Now it's students. You know, now in some schools, kindergarten children can decide which bathroom they're going to. There are efforts to erase any semblance of gender identity at all. Colors, clothes, toys, all of that is being erased so that there won't be any pressure on any child or any person to adhere to any particular type of identity. You know, we celebrate gay unions with the right to adopt children. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate about whether that's right or wrong, biblical or not, but the fact of the matter is, it speaks for itself. How in the world are children going to know without seeing what it is to have a man and a woman in their family? You know, the state of New York lists 31 different genders that are available for census purposes. Facebook has 65. Can you imagine 65 different gender identifications? You know, here's what I see in the future. I see people with little or no sense of self-worth or identity. I can see that happening. I can see an increase in depression and anxiety because of this confusion over who am I? I see difficulties in relationships when people are not able to adopt the roles that actually make their relationships complementary. I see increases in domestic violence because of this. Of course, there's frustration and there's pain and anger in these relationships. I also see a deterioration of the nuclear family, mom, dad, and children. Now, here's what I would ask of you as parents. Raise your children as boys and girls. Parent your children as moms and dads. Don't depend on culture or society or your kids' education to mold their sense of identity as to who they are. And I hope also that you'll take some of the things that you've learned from these sessions and begin to introduce them to your children so that they will understand what women are like, what men are like, and how they fit in a complementary way in a relationship and why that's important. I'm also going to ask you this. If you're in a relationship right now and you're having difficulties, don't go it alone. Find a counselor. And I'm going to ask you in particular to select a Christian counselor. Why? It's because they don't subscribe to all the mumbo jumbo that's going on in our popular culture. All of the advice that you'll get, whether they identify it or not, is this, will be biblical advice. They will not give you any advice that you can't find in Scripture at some point. Now, I also like to do this. If you need counseling, don't go for a referee. You don't need somebody to tell you that your husband is right or wrong, or your wife is right or wrong. You need to find someone who is a teacher who will show you what a relationship should look like. Now, I'm going to tell you that I prayed over the production of these DVDs and these sessions that we're having, and I hope that it will bless you and bless your family, and perhaps lead you to have a better relationship. And I'll continue to do that in hopes that your lives will be productive and enjoyable as God intended for that. And my prayers are with you on that. Thank you.